Greetings! Welcome to the Devlog for hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. So we've got a bit of a small one today, and the main reason for that is that today's patch update is mainly bug fixes and a bunch of internal API changes because we are preparing to get H3VR Studio, which is our tool, one of the sort of signature parts of H3 1.0. It's our tool for you being able to put a bunch of stuff up onto the workshop, and we're almost ready to let those of you who are interested in playing around with it get your hands on it on the experimental branch. So, as I said, a bunch of the stuff that we did this week is all a bunch of like backend stuff related to SOSIG loot tables and the take and hold characters. There's some internal changes to the way that things work for the take and hold lobby menu. Like when you select a character right now, you see a portrait of them. That's actually going to go away. Instead, we're going to have a holographic version of the SOSIG character that you're going to play. It basically internally spawns a vault file for them. I need to remake all of the pictures as vault files for all of my characters. But it means that when you make a custom take and hold character, because of the fact that it's like a SOSIG is there, but I'm showing player weapons and other props with it, you can essentially set that up in another scene that I'm working on, which I'll hopefully have the first version of next week for you, which is basically a photo studio. So you'll be able to set up a sort of SOSIG mannequin, put them in a specific outfit, give them some equipment, and save that down to a vault file and use that for what you see when you select that character in the take and hold lobby. So that's the main thing that we're working on right now outside of bug fixes, is making sure that all of that communication back and forth between the way H3 loads all of those custom data types and the way H3VR Studio authors those data types is all working without any sort of like major hitches. I'm super nervous. This is basically like another piece of whole piece of software. Nathan's done an incredible job with it, but boy howdy, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. So I'm really hoping that it goes smoothly. In terms of like the overall long plans, a bunch of folks have been basically wondering, like, when is H3 actually going to come out of 1.0? I mentioned in the Q&A before that it had meant to already be out for our 10th anniversary, but things have been taking longer. But this has been working out so well that I'll say right now that we are aiming for the 4th of July, which, I mean, for such a America game, just felt like the most appropriate thing to do. And so that is the date that we are aiming for officially going to 1.0 and coming out of early access, which is just, again, a little terrifying for me to think about. Truth be told, like I've been asked a number of times, like, what's with the like early access thing this long? Honestly, a bunch of the people that I work with have said similar things to me, and I don't know, in a big way, I think what like perpetually holding on to that label for me was to a big degree about a fear of change and about a fear of doing anything different with my life than just sort of like working on one little thing in the corner forever. It was, this has been, I've never worked on anything remotely this long in my life. Like even as H3 was originally conceived of, if you had asked me back, on Devlog 5, how long I expected H3 as a project to exist, how long that I, expected to work on it, I would have probably said something like, I don't know, like a year, maybe two. Like I had never worked on anything that long in my life. Like the longest thing had basically been like, like school projects. None of the contract stuff that I had ever worked on had been that long. So this has always perpetually been sort of like uncharted territory for me, which means that when you've never worked on something for this long, especially something that has carried the term early along with it, there's no roadmap for sort of like bringing that to conclusion, especially for a project like this, that always framed itself from the get-go as a series of improvisational experiments that was always about sort of like, what's the next thing to play with? What's the next thing to experiment with? Like, this isn't, there's certain sorts of structures of games where like you think of a roadmap at the beginning and there's a destination you're trying to get to a specific place, whereas H3 has always just been in the way that it's a sandbox game, has also been a sandbox for me to experiment with game mechanics and experiment with simulation and answer the various interesting questions about like what is meaningful to make in VR and what ends up being fun and what kinds of simulation are like interesting to work on but aren't really visual to, perceivable to players when they're actually in the game. And so yeah, it was always I'll put it this way. I'm very grateful to our mod community and our community of creators because, in a way, seeing their efforts and seeing what they've needed from us and the way that, the work that we do has sometimes gotten in their way and sometimes has helped, allowed me to actually conceptualize an endpoint that and goal to reach for that I really loved, which was the idea of solidifying enough of our code base and locking it in and being comfortable with the fact of like, no, this is just how take and hold is going to work. And this is how asset loading is just going to work. And this is how the SOSIGs are just going to be. And finally, and no longer keeping those things eternally in my head as like a work in progress. Oh, I'll just go back and tinker with one more thing with those systems. But like, bringing them to cohesion and living with them so that others can build on them without me kicking over their sandcastle over and over again. How to put this? I know a number of you have been with the project long enough that early on in H3's life, I didn't have a good relationship to the idea of modding. And in a really big way, I was worried about the way in which having a bunch of other people working on top of what I was making would change or limit or restrict my ability to follow my nose and do whatever I want without worrying about breaking their stuff. I mainly wanted to do my own thing. And part of that had also just been that I had never really like authored amongst a community of people. I imagine if my path towards making games had taken me through the mod community of some other game, I would probably have had a completely different relationship to those things. But anyway, this is like digression upon digression. But the core point here is that at the end of the day, I would say that the like journey of working on H3 has been a wonderful one of transition for me, of like growing to understand what a mod and creator community around a game is or could be, being changed by that experience and like using the experience of interfacing with that community to become a better software developer, a better designer, and someone who actually can like take into account those things for future projects. So I think it's apropos that so much of what we're doing for 1.0 is about that and about making sure to button things up and give a last big burst of awesome tools to you folks, whether it's those of you who just want to play around with the game planner stuff in scene and set up target ranges, to those of you who want to make like cool take and hold characters, to those of you who just want to sit there like someone at a buffet waiting for other people in the community to just drop all their cool stuff in front of you. And so I'm excited to see what you all end up making with this and going through this 1.0 transition through a bunch of really scary system stuff into a hopefully not too prolonged bug fixing phase past the release of all of those things. Fingers crossed. Anywho, if you are still sitting here listening to me sort of like opine about this coming moment, thanks so much. I definitely thanks to everyone who's been continuing to report bugs. I've just been checking them off the list and getting them in, and next week I will finally be able to get H3VR Studio into your hands, and we'll see what comes next. So hope you all have yourselves a wonderful weekend. I hope all of my little H3VR2 wish list now videos have not been too annoying, and I will see you all next week. Peace.